So, my philosophy when it comes to running my YouTube channel, as I'm sure you guys could guess, is when in doubt, just talk about Metroid. And as it turns out, that is the purpose of today's video, which I'm sure shocks none of you because I love talking about this topic in this franchise. I have some time and some motivation to make a video, and none of the kind of news or stories or other conversations going around out there are really inspiring much in me. But one thing I have been thinking about for a while is Metroid Prime 4, again, no surprise to anyone, and more specifically in today's video, I want to discuss the possible potential for the sales of the game. Of course, this is important for two main reasons, one being that despite how popular and long-running the Metroid franchise is, it's never been the biggest seller, and I think that we all know that. It doesn't really stack up to a lot of Nintendo's other bigger franchises. Games like Mario and Zelda and Pokemon and Animal Crossing and Smash Brothers and Mario Kart, these franchises that do absolutely absurd, insane, astronomical numbers. And even though most of us feel Metroid is as quality as those franchises, again, it just doesn't sell those numbers, man. And the other reason I think it's interesting to talk about the sales potential for Prime 4 is because of Metroid Red, which, as we know, is the most recent Metroid game released. It is less than 6 months old, as crazy as that might feel to a lot of us. And that game has also proven itself to be a huge seller when compared to the standard sales for a Metroid game, and it's worth noting that. In fact, it was very well documented that by the end of 2021, the game had sold a very impressive 2.74 million units, in only 2.5 months or so worth of sales and availability to the public. That is crazy, and who even knows where it's gone since then. So when we compare the trajectory of Metroid Dread and where it seems to be taking the overall franchise in terms of sales and success and reception and all of that stuff, as well as what we think may or may not be happening with Metroid Prime 4, when it could release, what platform or platforms it releases on, the quality we expect it to be. There's a lot to be excited for what might happen with Metroid Prime 4. Again, we're only talking about sales. This is about the sales, the reception, how the audience and the gamer and the Metroid fans actually embrace Metroid Prime 4. And the fact that we still don't even know when we're going to see it, but we did get that recent awesome tease from Retro Studios on their Twitter, where they updated their banner. You guys know, I've discussed it at length already. And so it's a very exciting time, and I want to hope this is going to be the biggest Metroid game at the time it releases. So let's dive into that. So going back to Metroid Dread for a minute, again, like I mentioned, by the end of 2021, 2.74 million units sold. So basically, we're rounding up to about 2.8 million. And at this point, there's no reason to think that Metroid Dread hasn't surpassed Metroid Prime to become the most successful and highest selling Metroid game of all time, which is no small feat, even though, like I said, the Metroid games don't typically sell a lot. I think the average is probably just over 1 million units per title. It's still impressive to note that after all this time, the newest game could come out in the franchise with a huge gap in between the most recent significant releases and sell so well. Obviously, part of that is the Switch effect, and I know sometimes folks want to downplay that, but I personally don't downplay that. As far as I'm concerned, the Switch effect is a real thing, and we've seen the biggest and most successful games in Nintendo's history release on the Nintendo Switch because it's such a popular device, and games, especially first-party games, and especially games that Nintendo puts all of their marketing muscle behind, they just do gangbuster numbers. Even third-party games like a Monster Hunter Rise, for example, they can do extremely well on the Nintendo Switch. I expect Bayonetta 3 to do the same, of course. Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. I mean, some of these games, especially exclusive ones, do extremely well on the Switch. So why wouldn't your Splatoons and Marios and Zeldas and whatnot, Fire Emblems, also do the best ever on the Switch? Metroid Dread proved that that's true even for the Metroid franchise. And I think it's also worth noting here near the end of March 2022 that we're going to be getting some updated sales numbers for the first quarter of the year on all of Nintendo's products and biggest games, and that will definitely include Metroid Dread. And I have no problem telling you that I have complete confidence that not only has Metroid Dread become the best-selling Metroid game of all time, it has without question surpassed 3 million units sold by the end of this first quarter of 2022. In less than 6 months, I know this in my very soul. I just feel like I'm cosmically tied to Samus and the Metroid franchise. And I just know it in my soul that this game has passed 3 million units in less than 6 months on store shelves, and that's going to be a really big deal. I don't really know if digital sales are included in these numbers. I don't think that they are, and if that's true and they're not included, then that means the sales are only going to be that much stronger, right? So either way, I know we've crossed 3 million units for Metroid Dread. It's only going to go up from here. I'm expecting about a 4 to 4.5 million total by the time things are said and done. And I think that's going to just be so great for the Metroid franchise and set it up for a very successful future. And that then, of course, brings us to Metroid Prime 4, the only confirmed Metroid game we know is also still being worked on. Yes, there are the rumors and the conversations about a Metroid Prime trilogy re-release or a remake of Metroid Prime 1, and I do definitely believe that something is happening there, absolutely, but nothing has yet been confirmed publicly, so we're still waiting to see what happens there. Right now, Prime 4 exists as the only game we know being made right now. And so my personal opinion on what might happen with the sales of Metroid Prime 4, again, no surprise to you, you've even probably heard me say this in prior videos, is I do think that also Metroid Prime 4 will itself become the biggest and most successful Metroid game of all time at the time that it releases. I do believe it is going to surpass Metroid Dread in terms of sales. There are so many reasons why I believe that that's going to be true. I think that the Switch effect is going to be a huge part of it because I do think there is a great chance, if not, honestly, probably a lock, that Metroid Prime 4 will have a release on the current Nintendo Switch that's already sold 103 million units and we know is going to continue to sell and break records for at least another year or so. It's going to get a release on this console. The install base is too important and too huge for Nintendo to ignore, especially for the Metroid franchise that, while it's currently on the upwards trajectory, could still use as much help as possible to be as successful as it deserves, right? The other reason is also because of Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread reviewing so well, selling so well, being so successful in terms of its quality and received so well means that people are more invested in Metroid than they have been in like 20 years. And so a lot of folks who even played Metroid Dread for their first ever Metroid game will now see a new Metroid game come out, and one that's going to be first person and just look absolutely fantastic and be so exciting. The Metroid Prime series is already the most publicly famous series within the Metroid franchise. I think that not only will all of the obvious diehards be jumping on board for Prime 4, but all of the newcomers that Metroid Dread and the Nintendo Switch brought into the fold will also be jumping on board, and I know that they're going to be excited to pick up Metroid Prime 4. And then, of course, the last and the biggest reason to me is because I personally feel, and again, this is only speculation, this is just my opinion and my prediction and my guess, okay? So, everyone calm down and put your pitchforks down. I'm just one guy who's a fan giving my own guesses out there, okay? So I could be wrong. People sometimes get so crazy about this stuff. You're just hearing a fan make a guess, okay? And my guess is that I think the release of Prime 4 has a great chance of lining up with the release window of Nintendo's next console, which I am predicting at the end of next year or around that time. And if that happens, I also think Prime 4 has a chance of launching either alongside of their next machine or within the first couple of months, you know, what we see as that sort of launch window for a new piece of hardware. And if that happens, and my guesses and my predictions and my theories turn out to be true, and I think that there's a great chance that they do, then we have a great chance at seeing Metroid Prime 4 release with a cross-gen release strategy, meaning it releases on the 103 million install base Nintendo Switch, which at that point, for all we know, could be 115 or 120 million, and also releasing on the new console, which becomes an exciting killer app when everyone is super primed and pumped for a brand new piece of Nintendo next-gen hardware. And if the next-gen version of Prime 4 also takes advantage visually of what the new power of the new console could be offering, then it's even going to be more exciting, and we're going to see this amazing looking, beautiful, stunning, next-gen, first-person Metroid game that, yes, you could buy the Switch version if you're not going to pick up the new console yet, and that's going to be great because of how many Switches will be out there, but you can also instead pick up the definitive next-gen amazing version on the very exciting new Nintendo hardware at the time, whatever that thing turns out to be. And so, again, just one guy's prediction, but if there's any truth to my prediction and my guess here with the possible cross-gen strategy for Metroid Prime 4, that combined with the Switch effect, combined with the Metroid Dread hype and the Metroid series being more popular than ever, means, of course, I think Metroid Prime 4 is going to be set up to be the most successful Metroid game of all time. And so then we ask ourselves what that could actually look like. What could those numbers be? And to me, that would be 5 million units or more. That's what I think the target sales unit is for Metroid Prime 4. Coming into Metroid Dread, many of us predicted that 3 million unit as like the ideal target for Metroid Dread to hit. We thought it would hit that. We knew that it would be seen as very successful if it did that. In fact, in my opinion, even at 2.7 million, it's already extremely successful. But we know it's going to get higher than that. 3 million was that bar. For me, Metroid Prime 4 has a bar of 5 million. And I know that might sound like a lot to some people for this franchise, but I really think, based on all of the factors I've already listed, including some other ones I'm not even talking about, I think 5 million is pretty realistic for Metroid Prime 4, considering it's a Nintendo franchise, and we know that those typically sell pretty well, and Nintendo promotes them very strongly. Now, earlier in the video, I told you that I think Metroid Dread has a chance at finishing its run at about 4 to 4.5 million units within its kind of full lifetime as a Nintendo Switch title. And if that's true, then again, 5 million becomes the ideal target, because 5 million is also more than that expected total I personally have with my own prediction of 4 to 4.5 million for Dread. So if Prime 4 is going to be more successful than that, it would have to sell, in my mind, with my predictions, more than 4.5 million. So again, we come back to that 5 million total. And if we get the cross-gen release, and if it comes out on the Switch with 115 or 120 million units sold for the Switch, that install base is just crazy. The game is set up for such success. In my opinion, I'll wrap the video up here. In my opinion, the one thing that could really hurt or kill Metroid Prime 4's chances of not being a huge success and the most profitable and successful Metroid game of all time, that one thing would be if the game is just bad. And we can't rule that out, guys. I don't think there's any way that that's going to happen. In my opinion, Nintendo and Retro Studios have shown us that they are doing everything possible to make this the best game it could be. From Nintendo's decision to cancel the old version and restart it brand new and give it to Retro Studios, to all of the insane talent we know that Retro Studios has brought on board to work on this game, with insane pedigree from Call of Duty and God of War and Tomb Raider and Borderlands and so many other things, not to mention the previous Retro staff. There is no way in hell I think Metroid Prime 4 won't be an amazing game. But the chance does exist. The possibility of it being a poor game is real. And so, like I was saying, the one thing that I think could hurt this game's chances is if it's really not all that good of a game. Because then the word of mouth spreads, and the kind of negative reputation the game could have would get out there pretty quickly too. Because we know that those reviews and those first impressions and those previews and those concerns, those conversations will be making the rounds leading up to the release of the game, and especially during that release week of the game, whenever the heck that is, 2023, 24, 25, who even knows at this point. I want to predict next year, but I could be wrong. And so, if the game is not good, that conversation will get out there, and it's definitely going to hinder and hurt the game's potential. So, hopefully that doesn't happen. You guys know me. I have faith in the game and in Nintendo and in Retro. I don't expect that to happen. But it's just worth mentioning, the one thing that could stifle the game's success is if it's just not very good. So these are just some of the thoughts that have been bouncing around my head for a couple of months. You know, about Metroid Prime 4 and how successful I think the game has a chance to be, and that honestly, as it stands right now, even though we haven't officially seen anything about the game or know when and where it's releasing, I honestly believe it's going to be great, and I do still believe it's going to be the best-selling game, just because maybe I'm being a bit of a fanboy and I want to believe in this game and this franchise. So, you've heard my feelings and my thoughts about this idea, and so now I want to hear what you guys think, you know, when you look at what Metroid Dread did, and we consider the possibilities of Metroid Prime 4's release, and when it might release, and the platforms it might release on, the quality we expect it to be, the kind of upwards trajectory that Metroid Dread is giving the Metroid franchise currently. How do you guys feel? Do you agree with me in the fact that I think it's going to be just doing gangbuster numbers? Or are you more cautious, and do you think it still might struggle to be as successful as we want it to be? Whatever you think, talk about it below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you guys next time on another video. Bye-bye.